Good morning, everyone. We've come back, so to speak, today, so we're doing our best to come out as and when we can. But I think to date, the remote working has seemed to have gone reasonably well, so I hope everybody's satisfied with it. Yes, Mr. Blake.
Thank you very much, Chair. We have Ms Hazelton here. Could I ask you to state your full name, please?
Susan Hazelton.
My name's Julian Blake, and I'm going to be asking questions today on behalf of the Chair. You should have in front of you a witness statement.
I do indeed.
And that's dated the 12th of January. Sorry, you have to take the oath. 1 second, sorry.
Would you just like to stand up, please, and repeat after me? I do solemnly, sincerely and truly
I do solemnly, sincerely and truly
declare and affirm
that
the evidence I shall give
the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Please sit down.
Thank you very much. You have before you a witness statement, and it's dated the 12th of January of this year. Is that right?
It is correct.
Could I ask you just to look at the final page of that witness statement? I think it's page 16.
Yep.
And is that your signature? At the,
It is my signature, yes.
And can you confirm that that statement is true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm going to start by asking you a bit about your background. How old are you now?
I'm 68.
And whereabouts are you from?
I'm from Barnsley in South Yorkshire.
What area do you live in now?
In Chelmsford in Essex.
Before that, I think you were abroad for a while.
Yep, we lived in, my partner Stephen and myself lived in Australia for 11 years. My son and daughter, who are twins, were born there.
And what did you do in Australia?
Admin work, which is what I've normally done, reception, secretarial. Stephen had for a time, a business putting racking into warehouses, things like that.
And at some point you moved to Essex, is that?
We did. We came back from Australia when James and Siobhan were 1. And we lived for a while in my sister's house in Warrington in Lancashire. She'd recently moved, and so we lived in her house for quite a while whilst we looked around for a business. The business that we chose to do was to run a post office. So we looked at several, all in the southeast, and decided that the one in Chelmsford was suitable for us because of the lovely village location, the village school.
Can you describe that village for us?
Yes, if you want estate agents speak, it's much desirable. It's a lovely little village. It's got a mixture of old houses like mine, some newer ones. There's a lovely river down the bottom of the street. We've got a lovely village pub, and up until recently we had a cricket green and a local school. It's really a nice village to live in.
And what about your house?
It's 500 years old. It's a listed building, not to everyone's taste. A lot of maintenance is involved.
Is the post office part of your house?
Yes.
And why did you buy a post office?
We bought a post office because it seemed to us like it was a trustworthy organisation, an organisation that we could hopefully work with, be a good part of our community. I'm people person, I like people. We thought it wouldn't be too hard to learn. And obviously the location was due to it, but we just wanted to have a business that the post office provided their business, really. They provided the stamps and everything like that. We provided the other things for the general store. But it seemed like a partnership. And we were quite pleased with that. We thought it was something that we could really work on and grow.
Do you remember how much you paid for the post office?
The actual building or the business?
The business itself.
The business, I believe, we paid £46,000 for.
And how
I believe.
Yes. And how did you pay for that?
Just before we came back from Australia, my partner's father had unfortunately passed away, and he had left us some inheritance.
You became a sub-postmistress, I think, on the 1st of March 1995. Is that right? Thereabouts. That's
That would be thereabouts,
Yeah.
yes. I can't truthfully remember. I thought it was... Oh, no, yeah, you're right, 95, yes, sorry. Yes,
And at that stage, it was before Horizon was in place.
yes.
And
It was before I was a long time before.
what did you use instead of Horizon at that stage? Do you remember?
Paper-based. And I used my brain.
Apart from a post office, I think you also had a shop, is that
We
right?
did. We had we ran alongside it a little grocery store, as most post offices do, selling the usual milk, bread, sugar, things like that.
And who worked there?
I worked in the post office. Mr. Hazelton worked in the shop.
When Horizon was introduced, did you receive training?
I did.
And how was that arranged?
It was arranged by the post office. It was, I believe, in a hotel in Margaretting, which is not far from where I live, perhaps 30 minutes drive.
Was it free?
Yes, it was free.
How long did it last for?
Again, from memory, I'm going to say a couple of days.
And was it useful?
In part, yes. I'm like a lot of people at that stage. I'd never touched a computer. So for me, it wasn't totally straightforward. And for other people on the course, it wasn't straightforward. The two chaps that were running the training were very pleased with themselves that they knew all about computers and were whizzing through this information at a rate which I couldn't keep up with. And I did ask them on a couple of occasions, as other people did, could they please backtrack a little bit so that we could catch up on this information.
I think in your witness statement that you said that you actually paid £3,000 for it.
That was for the initial training for the post office, from when we first took it over. That was for that training, not for the Horizon. Sorry if I'm
No, not at all.
mistaking you.
I'm going to move on to problems that you experienced with Horizon. What was the first time that you noticed a problem? Do you remember?
Yes, I can remember. I was contacted by means that I can't remember, whether it was telephone or a message on that computer, I can't remember, that on a particular Saturday night, I had to leave the computer on for updates. And from then on, everything went wrong.
When you say everything went wrong, can you give...
Yes, so for the first week after this had happened, I did my balance, and it was, let's for example's sake, say it was £160 out. That was a bit scary, but I thought might come out with error notices within time, a couple of weeks. But the next week it had doubled, and the week after that it doubled, and it was like a snowball collecting more snow. It was growing, and it was frightening, and I kept asking for help.
Did you call the helpline?
I did. I called the helpline once a week.
And did they help?
No.
Can you describe the kinds of conversations you had with the helpline?
I would tell them the history of what was happening, and their attitude on all occasions was to put it in eventually it was to put it in a suspense account. Weekly, it was, don't worry about it, it'll all work itself out.
So the first response was, it'll work itself out.
Yes.
And did that change at some point?
By the time it got to £4,500 or £600, I was really, really, really worried. And they said, you can put that money into a suspense account for 6 weeks. That's as long as you're allowed to leave it in a suspense account. And then, being the postmistress, I was responsible for that money.
And you say you were responsible. You were responsible for paying it.
Yes,
And did you pay it?
yes.
And how did you pay it?
I can't actually remember what methods of payment we had 21 years ago, but if we did them over the phone, it would have been that way. It might have been a cheque. I truthfully can't remember. But what I will say, if you don't mind, is that for a big organisation putting in a computer system, they didn't have a computer helpline, an IT helpline. And I believe that the people who were operating the helpline had no more idea about the computer system than I did. I don't think they knew where to turn. So they had a stock answer for everyone who rang up. It's not happening to anyone else. I just leave it as it is and it will sort itself out.
You've
But you
said,
can't leave it forever, especially when it's snowballing out of control, which I thought it was.
you've said that you were told that it wasn't happening to anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? Mm-hmm. Did you think that there were others affected at that time?
No, I believe what I was told.
I'm going to take you chronologically through one specific problem that you had. I think in October or November 2000, towards the end of 2000, I think you experienced a shortfall of £6,000. Is that right?
Yes, yes.
Do you remember the circumstances of that one?
Only that that was a collective amount. It didn't just suddenly become £6,000. It was a collection of everything that had built up. And by error notices, that actually came down to 4,300, which is what I ended up paying.
So when you first noticed that it had reached £6,000, did you phone the helpline?
I phoned the helpline every week because there was something wrong. But they didn't have an answer for me, except it'll all sort itself out.
And when it reached £6,000, did you call anybody else other than the helpline?
I don't think so. I don't think there was anybody else to call. The area manager at that time wasn't always available to get hold of. So it would have been the helpline. I can't think I would have called anyone else.
By February 2001, you've said that there were error notices. Can you explain that, please?
Well, if you've done something wrong on the... it would have been originally paper-based, but then by computer. Say, for example, if someone came into my post office to pay in a cheque, but I put it as a debit instead of a credit, that would throw the finances out. And eventually, when it got to wherever it went to after that, somebody would have noticed that I'd done that wrong and correct it. So that would generate an error notice.
So the £6,000 went down to £4,300. And what do you do about that £4,300?
I had to pay it. I was told I could keep it in a suspense account for 6 weeks, then I had to pay it. It was my responsibility.
And did you speak to anybody about that?
No, I accepted it that's what I had to do. Obviously, I was very naive and didn't. And because I was told I was the only one with that problem, and also I was going on holiday, and we had to pay somebody when we went on holiday to come and look after the post office, and another postmaster who did local work, for example. And as well as paying that money in, it meant, in my mind, it wouldn't cause him any problems, because the account then would be as it should be. Yeah. But I have to say that when I spoke to the helpline on the last occasion and I paid that money and I said that when I come back from holiday, I want these accounts looked at and I want that money back.
So you said that you wanted the accounts looked at. Was that an audit that you asked for?
I didn't particularly ask. Well, yes, didn't particularly refer to an audit, but an audit or somebody in the IT, if they had an IT department, to look at the system and see what was going wrong.
Back in early 2000, so at the end of 2000, early 2001, you had that £6,000 shortfall. Did somebody from the post office come and look at that?
No.
And then by March 2001, when it had been slightly reduced, did auditors come then?
The post office. When did the post office auditor come? The post office auditor. I'd had several audits throughout throughout running the post office. There was no problems with them. But the last time I remember the auditor coming was the day that they closed it, and there was nothing wrong with the audit. There was no money missing. There was no stamps missing. There was nothing. All the errors, all the shortfalls, for example, they were just on paper. There was nothing missing. And that's what I couldn't understand. It's not like I'd taken money, or the money was there, the stamps were there, anything of value was just there. And it's just unbelievable.
Did you have a conversation with somebody called Angela Reid?
Yeah, she was an auditor.
And can you tell us about that conversation you had about problems with pension allowance, is it?
Oh, that wasn't her. No, I didn't have that conversation with her. I had that conversation with the not auditors, with the team that a couple of people they sent to investigate. Because while this was going on, I'd just paid them £4,500, and then the auditors came. Sorry, let me retract, because this is quite a long time ago. The auditors came back after I'd put that money in. The auditor came back along with 2 investigators. They closed the post office, and they said that I claimed in the region of £300 more than I'd paid out. So I'd frauded them, or I'd stolen that money, even though they'd just taken £4,300 from me. And so I said, they questioned me. They were very intimidating. And I said to them, well, if you've got proof, or when you get proof, take that £300 out of the money I've just paid you for nothing, apart from your computer saying I owe it.
And where was the conversation happening with the investigators?
In my house, in my living room.
Were you legally represented at that point?
No. My partner Stephen wasn't even allowed to be there. He had to stand in the shop whilst the auditor did the audit, and while they questioned me. And they were very intimidating. There was a tall chap who stood up all the time, and another one who sat down, it was like bad cop, good cop scenario. And at the end of the conversation, obviously, I'm not a shrinking violet, and I said to them, what I thought. And at the end of the conversation, before they left, they said, "We'll see you in court."
Did they take anything with them?
Well, they took all the... yes, they took everything. The auditor did. She did the audit. She took everything. And that's what I'm saying. There was nothing missing. The audit was fine. So she took all the books, all the things of value, and just left us with an empty post office, an empty safe, and their stupid computer.
Looking back at that day, do you recall where your children were at that time?
My children would have been at school. Sorry, I'm getting things a little bit mixed up, and I do apologise.
Not at all.
Yes, no, yeah, their children would have been at school that day. Although every day they were 9 years old. But it was about 6 weeks after that episode that they came back with police and charged me for fraudulently taking £300.
Yes.
And I was taken to the police station and questioned.
And who took you to the police station?
The police did, and their investigators.
Were you told why they were taking you there?
Because I'd stolen money.
And how long were you at the police station for? Do you remember?
Yes, I do. Because it was nearly time for the children to come home from school. They wouldn't allow me to go and pick up my 9-year-old children from school. So it must have been school coming out time, which is about 3, and I got home at 10 o'clock.
Would you like to take a
As
break?
Mr. Blake is...
No, I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. It's just that they said I couldn't go and collect the children from school. They would collect them in the police car, and they would take them to the station, and they would have to stay there until they finished questioning me. Now, what mother wants that for her children? To be taken to a police station to sit there, worried, frightened, while their mother's being questioned for... They wouldn't have known why. And eventually... and they were very, they weren't very keen on doing it, but eventually they let me make a phone call. They weren't going to let me make a phone call. And so I rang a good friend who, without asking the reasons why, picked up my children from school and kept them with her and her children until I got back.
Do you remember who interviewed you? Was it the police or was it the
It was
investigators?
a combination. It was a combination. It was unbelievable. Totally unbelievable. And just to set another scene on this day that they came, before they came, I had just had a mobile hairdresser in my house. She'd cut my hair. So I'd washed my hair and thrown on a T-shirt while she cut my hair. Soon after that, this is when they knocked on the door and came in. So I had no bra on. I had wet, damp hair, and I felt quite vulnerable. And I said, if you're going to take me to the police station, I need to get dressed properly. They wouldn't even allow me to go upstairs on my own to put a bra on. The female officer came up with me, and she was opening my cupboards, my drawers, and I said to her, what on earth are you looking for? It was totally over the top.
And as far as you were aware at that time, it was concerning a £300 shortfall.
Yeah.
Was it?
But they wouldn't. But when I was at the police station being questioned, as I said, I'm no shrinking violet and I can stick up for myself. And I wanted to talk about the money they'd just taken from me, the £4,300 they'd taken from me. They wouldn't talk about that. And I said, well, why won't you talk about it? You're willing to talk about this imaginary £300, but by the way, they had no evidence of, and never did provide any evidence, but you won't talk about the £4,300. And eventually I was shut down. If you can understand me, I was shut down. I was told, we're not going to discuss that.
And you were suspended as sub-postmistress.
I'd already been suspended when they came and did the audit that day, when they came and questioned me at home.
I'm going to move on to the prosecution.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Can you remember what you were charged with?
Theft.
And how did you plead?
I pleaded not guilty because I didn't do anything.
And did that involve
Can I
going
be clear, was it theft of £300?
Yes.
Fine, thank you.
And do you remember which courts you went
It was
to?
Chelmsford.
I think it may have started in the magistrates' court, did it? Do you remember?
It possibly did. I'm really sorry. Some things are a bit misty over time.
How long did you have these court proceedings hanging over you?
18 months. 18 horrible months, which was a cruel thing to do to somebody. Because every time they set a date to go to court, sorry if I'm shouting, but I'm a little bit deaf. Every time they set a date to go to court, I would build myself up psychologically and be prepared, only to find then they'd change their mind, they weren't going for it. This happened twice. And on the third occasion, whoever makes decisions said that they either went to court or dropped it. And on the 11th hour, the day before I was meant to make a court appearance, they dropped it.
Before Mr. Blake asks you any more about that, can I explain that my colleagues and I want to hear your evidence in the way you want to give it, Miss Hazelton, okay? So don't worry about shouting or don't worry about being upset. We just want to hear you tell us what you want to say.
Thank you.
All right?
During that 18-month period, what did you think was going to happen?
I thought I was going to go to prison because I'd been told I could get a custodial sentence. I don't know by who, whether it was a solicitor or the police or these two clowns from the post office, but somebody told me that I could get a custodial sentence. So I'm not familiar with the laws. I don't know what goes on. But all I knew was I was frightened. I'd done nothing wrong, and I was frightened. I was frightened that even though I've done nothing wrong, things not providing any proof, that for some reason I was going to end up in prison.
Were you told why your case wasn't going ahead?
Because because they had no evidence, or they couldn't provide any evidence, or words to that effect. But as it came out, the words were, to me twisted, because even though I wasn't prosecuted, he had this impression that, well, we know you've done it, but we can't prove it. So it still wasn't truthful and honest.
With the criminal proceedings gone, did they stop pursuing you for money?
No, it's sometime later, which I can't remember the date, I received a letter from them saying I owed them £1,800. I haven't got the letter anymore, unfortunately, but I do remember getting it, and I contacted a solicitor in Chelmsford who very kindly told me what to put as a reply.
Do you remember what you put as a reply?
That the court wouldn't take favourably to them pursuing this, as they didn't pursue the court case, or something along those lines.
Do you remember how you felt on receiving that letter?
Angry, confused. Here we go again. I just felt that this was just going on and on. Surely the dropping of the court case, that's it, should be the end of it. But then suddenly, I don't know where this £1,800 came from, what it was for. Just you owe us this money.
I'm going to move on to the impact on you, financial and personal. I'll start with financial. How much did you pay the post office overall, do you recall?
For the business?
No, during the course of the business for the shortfalls.
The £4,300.
4,300. And what happened to your branch?
It was just closed. We tried to carry on with the general store for a while, but nobody was coming in, so we couldn't really survive that way. We got a mortgage to pay, 2 young children. Wasn't good.
And what happened to your mortgage?
We had to go from a... Unfortunately, we didn't lose the house, and we were so close to losing it, but we didn't. So we negotiated with the bank to have an interest-only mortgage instead of a prepayment mortgage. And unfortunately, in the next few weeks, we're going to have to put the house on the market and sell it, because we haven't got the money to pay what we owe them, what we owe the bank. So.
What happened to your salary?
My salary?
The money you were earning through the post office?
I didn't. Well, once it stopped, it stopped. Do you mean whilst I was working for the post office?
No, afterwards.
Well, the salary stopped. I had no money. We were just left. It was, here, thank you very much. We'll take all our stuff. You're just left with an empty shell. It was awful. It was just like, somebody pulled a rug from under you. Suddenly you've got no income. You've got no... we had a little bit of savings, so we used that, not very much. And eventually we got other jobs. But the jobs market wasn't particularly good then. And both myself and Stephen ended up working at Stansted Airport. And a great place to work, but money's not fantastic. And we took shifts so that we could look after the children. So I did an early shift. I started at 5 in the morning until 1. Then Stephen did an afternoon shift, so that he took them to school in the morning. I picked them up in the afternoon.
We've heard some evidence from people who were prosecuted and convicted that they've received interim payments from the post office. Have you received an interim payment?
No, I have not.
You joined the group action, the Bates and others case, and I think you were awarded some money through that.
Yes, that's correct.
Do you remember how much?
Well, I think it was around £15,000.
Moving on to the personal impact. It was reported in the paper at the time, I think, that the prosecution. How did that impact on you?
Oh, my God, it was awful. A friend called me and she said, have you seen the Essex Chronicle? And I said, no. She said, well, I think you need to look. And there it was. My name has been, I've been charged with theft or fraud. I don't know which way they put it then. and where I lived, etc. So I did look at the Chronicle, and I was absolutely shocked. When my children got home from school, I sat them down and I said to them that you're going to hear things about Mum. They're not true. Just ignore them. But there's something in the Chronicle that says I've done something wrong. Just ignore it, because I haven't. Not an easy thing to do.
How has it impacted on your children, do you think?
Well, they were 9 years old at the time, so it was impacted at school because they were mildly bullied, until I went up and spoke to the school and said, you need to stop this. Please do whatever you can to stop this. It was, your mum, because you know what children are like. They're mean and nasty. Your mum's a liar. Your mum's a thief. It's your mum's fault that we haven't got a post office and a shop anymore. So, it's all down to me. And I think it's affected them also from a financial point of view, because although I don't think they've missed out on anything particularly, we didn't have the money to do perhaps what some families were doing.
And how are you treated by the local community?
Not great. To start off with, don't get me wrong, my core group of friends have always been friends, and they're friends now. They would have been here today if I'd have wanted them to. But in essence, I was ignored. People would cross the street when they saw me. Things like that. I could hear people talking about me. My house is... You've seen a picture of my house where the post office is. If people standing outside who didn't know it was closed, so they're trying the door, and then someone would walk past and say, oh, it's not open anymore. This is what happened. It's in the Chronicle, blah, blah, blah. And so I could hear them talking about me. So I would close the curtains so that I didn't have to see them, or I'd go out in the car so that I didn't have to hear them. And that happened for a long time. I think it's different now in the village, because a lot of people who were there at the time are newcomers, and they wouldn't know that. But the people who were there then, they just ignored us.
What would you like from the post office?
What would I like? For myself and everybody else who's gone through this experience, I'd like fair compensation. I'd like to be put back in a position that, if all went well in the world, that I would be in now. I wouldn't still be working at 68. I'd have a lovely little shop and post office that perhaps my children might want to run, or not, as the case may be. But I'd have that. I'd have a house that was paid for, because I would have been able to afford the repayment mortgage. I want to be back in that position if I can. I want a huge apology, because I did nothing, absolutely nothing, and it's gnawed away at me for nearly 21 years. It's gnawed away at my peace of mind. It's gnawed away at my trust in organisations. It's made me wonder what the legal system's like in this country, that I had to go through all that 18 months worth of not knowing what was going to happen. And on the last day of that, the last suggested date for the trial, when it was cancelled, I think it was 6 o'clock in the evening the night before, I had filled up my freezer with nutritious meals for my partner and my children. I had done a lot of things so that if I did go to prison, but I didn't know what was going to happen, that they would be well cared for a certain amount of time.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Referring to that particular day, and in the week, you won't be in this position, and it's only people like us who've been in this position would know what it's like. You've got to psych yourself up for this trial, but you don't know what's going to happen, because it's something that's totally unfamiliar, something totally out of your comfort zone, and you don't know what's going to happen, what they're going to say to make me go to prison. Every day that week, I was physically sick because I was frightened. I was frightened for me, I was frightened for my family, and I hated being in that position. And unless you've gone through that, it's hard to believe.
Chair, do you have any questions at all?
No, I don't have any questions of you, Miss Hazelton, but I want to use something you told me to make some inquiries publicly of both the inquiry lawyer and your own legal team. And I don't expect instant answers from anybody. I make that clear. But you have told me that you were prosecuted and in the end acquitted.
No, I wasn't prosecuted,
Yeah,
sir.
no, you were prosecuted.
Was I?
Yes, you went to court.
Oh.
And in the end, you were acquitted. I think I've got that right. And my understanding of the settlement in the Bates litigation is that those who might have a claim for malicious prosecution, those rights were preserved. I think I'm right in saying that, notwithstanding the full and final nature of the settlement in other respects. First question, can a person who has been acquitted sue for malicious prosecution? I'm not going to make any definitive legal rulings, but the answer, I think, is yes. And if that is correct, it appears to me that there may be a loophole or a lacuna in the sense that those who have been convicted and had their convictions quashed are entitled to an interim payment. But those who may have been acquitted may fall into a hole, so to speak. And I must say I'm reasonably unhappy about that state of affairs, given that their rights to sue for malicious prosecution have been preserved, apparently. And accordingly, I would like at some point in the not too distant future for your legal team to write me a short note explaining the position that I've set out with some answers to it, and my own legal team will do its research as well, because I want to understand whether the interim scheme, which is apparently being applied as we are going along, so to speak, is being fair to everyone who might take advantage of it. Now, I'm saying all this, I hope, in entirely neutral tones, and there will be people listening, I'm sure, who will have views about this. But I would not want a category of potential claimants to be disadvantaged if, as my understanding is, that is a possibility.
So we will address this in writing and return to
Yeah.
it. May I just mention one matter to Mr. Blaine?
Of course.
Your barrister's asked me to ask a further question, and it relates to a paragraph in your witness statement. After your post office closed,
Yes.
can you tell us what you saw in Sub Postmasters magazine?
Yes. As I said earlier, this is 21 years ago, and so I can't remember the publication. I'll check with Mr. Hazelton when I get home because he has a better memory of these things. But I seem to think that there was some sort of magazine, supposed as a monthly or whatever it was called. And in there was a segment of another postmaster who had had problems with the computer and had a discrepancy, for want of a better word, of about £20,000. And it was then, and only then, that I knew categorically that someone else was going through this, and it wasn't just me, which I'd been told on a lot of occasions, nobody else is going through this problem. And I categorically knew then that there's somebody else out there who was going through the same thing.
And you've said that you were told several times that nobody else
Yeah.
was going through it.
Yeah.
Can you recall who told you?
I did the helpline, definitely. I think the area manager, Tony Newman, I think he mentioned it. It would have been those, and it wouldn't have been the police, because they wouldn't have known anything about that. So someone to do with the post office has said on more than one occasion, there's nobody else going through that, nobody else with these problems. But then I knew that there was, and that was quite a bit comforting in a way, to know that I'm not an idiot. It's not just me that's going through this, there is someone else, at least one person. Turns out there's 500 of us. But at that stage, I thought, well, there is at least one more person who is suffering from these computer issues.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming to give evidence to us.
You're very welcome.
We greatly appreciate it. All right. So shall we have a short break while we prepare for the next witness?
Yes.
Remote, I think. Yes?
I'm grateful, Chair. Perhaps a 10-minute break, so 20 past 11.
Fine.
Thank you, Chair. We have Ms Martin, who's joining us remotely.
Yeah.
Good morning, Miss Martin. I'm Jane the usher, and I will be taking you through the affirmation. If you'd just like to repeat after me, I do solemnly, sincerely and truly
I do solemnly, sincerely and truly,
declare and affirm
declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
will be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Julian Blake, as you know, and I'm asking questions on behalf of the Chair. The Chair sits here as well in person today. Although I'm looking at you on a screen over there, I think actually I'm going to look in the camera there because that should help you see me. You should have before you a statement which is dated the 12th of January of this year. Is that right?
Yes, I have, yeah.
Could I just take you to the final page of that statement, page 18?
Yeah,
Is that your signature at the bottom of the statement?
but
And is the statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
it is.
I'm going to start by just asking you some questions about your background. Where in the country do you live now?
I'm in York.
And who do you live with?
I live with my partner and my 12-year-old daughter.
And I think you have two other daughters.
I have two sons. They're in the 30s. One lives in Canada and one lives in Edinburgh.
Can you tell us what your first jobs were before the post office?
Well, I started out I went to a business training school and I started out in accountancy. I worked as a credit controller for a large building firm. I worked at a building society, and then I was working at the Environment Agency, doing their admin. And then I was pregnant. I left because I got pregnant and I was quite ill when I was pregnant. And I was married young, and I went on to have two children. And I had a break for several years until I went into the post office when we were a bit older.
And I think that was 1999 when you first started working at a post office branch. Where was that?
It was in Liphook in Hampshire.
And I think you then worked in York, is that right?
Yeah, my ex-husband's father was ill. We'd moved back to York and I was working at the main post office, the Crown office in York Centre.
And while you were working in the Crown office in York, did you work any other jobs?
Yes, I worked for other post offices providing holiday cover, I was helping out at a small post office where the manager was struggling, and I left my job at the main post office to go work more hours for him, again in York, in a place called Clarence Street in York. I was also covering for Mr. Murray on weekends, so I'd work both jobs together. I'd work the days that I was working at one, I would work at the other, and if I was on holiday from one, I would go work at the other.
Sorry, you've mentioned Mr. Murray. Who is Mr. Murray?
He was the previous postmaster of the post office that I took over in Clarence Street, in Crichton Avenue, sorry, in York. And he was my boss for a while, who then became my landlord once I took on the post office.
Up until the point when you became a sub-postmistress, how long had you worked or been associated with the post office?
16 years.
And can you tell us how you became a sub-postmistress?
Alistair wanted to sell up, and the people who'd wanted to take it on, the post office had said there wasn't enough space and were really acting up. I'd spoken to my partner, and things had been going really well for us. We'd managed to, we'd only been together a relatively short amount of time. Our daughter was 4, we'd managed to buy our home, passed my driving test. He'd relocated to York because he was originally from Crawley. And everything seemed to be going in an upward momentum. He found a job in York very easily. And I say we bought our council home. And it was just an option of, because I loved the post office. I really enjoyed it. It was the best job I'd ever had. I really got something out of it. I felt like it was my calling. I was going to be doing it until I retired, regardless of whether I worked for myself or I worked for anybody else. And until that point, I'd never actually thought about taking on a post office of my own. I was happy to work for somebody else. I just enjoyed the work. I still enjoyed going. And I just felt that was such a big thing, because every other job I'd never really loved,
In addition to the post office, did you also run a retail business?
Yeah, we were just selling like cards, stationery, and a few toys and bits and pieces.
What did you have to do in order to become a sub-postmistress?
I had to provide a financial background. I obviously had to be legally checked out, everything like that. So they looked at everything, and I never had a parking ticket. I had A-rated credit. So we just had to prove that we were financially able to take it over, and that post office could come after our home if anything went wrong.
And in terms of the actual branch itself, did you have to do anything to that?
Yeah, we had to refurbish it. It was part of being disability compliant. So we had to make sure that we had automatic opening doors. So we had a button fitted so the door would open automatically for people in wheelchairs. We had the wheelchair ramp improved. I also had to make sure there was nothing on the floors, because they left me relatively little amount of space. Everything I was going to be selling really had to be hung on the walls, because it was a very small shop. And I borrowed a significant amount of money from the bank to do the refurbishment. And the idea was that I had to pay for all the remedial works, and the post office would move all the equipment as their cost.
Can you estimate how much you spent on that refurbishment?
Well, I borrowed 20,000 straight away from the bank. I had 8,000 of my own savings, and I borrowed 5,000 from my father. So 33,000 was the figure that I sort of started off with. But as soon as I took the bank loan out, from day one of taking the bank loan out, the interest was added. So I actually, instead of owing the bank the 20, I owed the bank £28,000. And the refit itself was about £16,000, and then I had to take over all the stock and things like there was furniture and stuff like that we had to have things. I got things specially made. I bought all the fittings for the walls and stuff like that. So I wasn't left with any money.
And you've said that the post office was responsible for installing some things. What were they responsible for?
They were responsible for the wiring. They were responsible for the location of the safes and the providing the safes and the equipment, and getting them fitted. Their team fitted them. My team did the refurbishment.
Moving on to training, you said that you first worked in a post office role in 1999. Did you receive training then?
When I worked in Liphook in Hampshire, we were one of the trial offices for Horizon, for the original Horizon system. And we went off for, I think it was a few days, I can't remember exactly how long it was. It was just a short course. And basically it was just role play of when somebody came in, this is your screen in front of you, how to basically sell a stamp. But to be honest, it was just on like a training module. You learned more as you went along. In fact, I was the youngest person at the post office. And I actually found the job fairly easy. I didn't find it too complex at all. I'd had other people who'd gone for it and couldn't handle it. But the way my brain works, it worked, it wired right for me. And obviously being the youngest, I was a bit more computer literate at that time because obviously I'd been to business training, college and stuff like that. So I'd had a little bit of time on computers and stuff as well. So the older ones who struggled with the computers, they knew the job better. They would teach me the job and I would show them the way around the computer.
When you moved to the York post office, the central one, did you have any involvement with Horizon at that stage?
Yeah, we were still working on Horizon at that stage because this was 2 years on after I'd started, by which time Horizon had been rolled into every office. So we were still on Horizon in York. And obviously there was a lot of people worked around. It was no longer a small office. You always had 8 or 9 more members of staff working alongside you. So if there was anything you were unsure of, there was enough people there to ask, and somebody would have done it before, you know.
And how about when you became a sub-postmistress? Was there training then?
No, what they did was they sent, it was a lady to sort of see how things had gone. She was about 20 odd years old. She'd only done the job for a few months. She really didn't have a clue. And she stood around for a couple of hours and said, oh, you know more than I do. I'll give you a ring tomorrow and see if I need to come back. And she shot off after about 2 hours. But actually, in the time that she was there, we had issues with the safe where it would lose its memory. So it was a special safe. It was done on a computer program. You couldn't go to it with a key and open it. You had like a special pod, and it had separate sections. Now, I was what you call in the secure area. I was behind the glass. I used to call it the goldfish bowl. So I was in the goldfish bowl and the other lady was out the glass. The lady out the glass could only keep a very, very small amount in her till at any one time. So she'd be in and out this safe constantly because if she needed £600 and she could only keep 500 on the counter, she'd have to immediately go get another £500 out of this safe. And she'd said to me, Wendy, you won't give me money. It's telling me it's empty. And the girl who was there didn't know what to do, so I'd had to ring up the helpline, and they told me, oh, you'll have to find the special pod and you'll have to empty it. And you had to go through each section till you found some money and then take it out. Once it was completely empty, we loaded it back up again. And the girl didn't know why that had happened, and we just assumed it was first day. We were only actually open for 4 hours on the first day. We didn't open until the afternoon. So we'd already had our first issue on the first day. Plus we were getting to grips with the fact that obviously the girl on the non-secure area couldn't do certain transactions. So I'd be in the secure area trying to maybe count a safe or whatever, and I kept getting called off jobs because the safe had lost its money and costs. I'd have a business customer in who wanted to pay in a larger amount of money and she couldn't take it. So initially, for that first few weeks, you worked in separate units. So each person had their own stock unit. Because I kept getting called off jobs that I was doing, I'd end up working in the wrong unit, which it was easy enough to sort, but I just initially, for the first few weeks, thought I was just being a numpty. It was me. It was just because I kept getting called off my jobs and having all these problems with the safe. And I had the alarm company kept phoning up telling me, your alarm's going off, you've touched your security, your buttons underneath. And I was like, well, there's nobody even working at that counter, so we can't have done. And actually, after that, it turned out that the safe wasn't wired incorrectly as well. And it was linked to the wrong office. So what was working, some things weren't wired in, things like the panic button was never wired in. So had I pressed it, had I had an issue, the police wouldn't have come. But the rest of it was linked to the wrong office. So it must have been, apparently, it was linked to an office in Leeds. So the chances are that they were there having a trial, but because they told them they were in Leeds and that my office was York, when they'd pressed the panic button for the trial, that's why they thought I was pressing my panic buttons.
So there are a range of initial problems with the safe, with the alarms. I want to talk to you about problems with Horizon. What did you think was the cause of those early problems that you were having in your post office?
I just wasn't even sure. I just know that we'd gone from an office that worked really well to where I was coming home on a night and I just didn't know where the cash figures would sit, because what was happening was I would check my figures and check the cash and it would show a discrepancy. So I'd think, oh, what have I done? And you'd go around everything and you'd recheck it. And by the time you'd rechecked it, you put in the same figure and the discrepancy figure would have changed. But you could put the two things side by side. Your figures were identical, but the discrepancy amount had changed. At one time, it went from saying it was £3,500 short within 20 minutes to saying it was a few £100 short.
You experienced problems. Did your customers experience problems?
Yeah, I had customers phoning me up telling me we paid a bill and they're still chasing us for it and they're telling us it hasn't been paid. And I'd say, well, have you got your receipt? And a lot of the time people didn't keep receipts. So I'd have to pull out all the back office stuff to find the transaction, to give them the reference number. And then I'd give them the reference number and I'd hear no more from them. So I just always assumed it was rectified, but I never knew what was causing it. And there was one Saturday afternoon where it started on the Thursday. I did the money on the Thursday and it was the balancing week the following week. So anything you put in on the balancing week, you have to physically put the money in. So on the Thursday night, I was £350 short. But because at this time I was having so many of these random discrepancies, by the time I checked the next morning, quite often it wasn't showing a discrepancy. But the next day when I did the cash again, I was still showing us this £350 short. So I really thought, this has got to be a genuine discrepancy. So it was there on the Thursday night and it was there on the Friday night. So on the Saturday, I was a bit quieter on the Saturday. I pulled out every stock unit, I checked every stamp, I checked everything, made sure each person's unit was correct. I then checked the main safe, and the discrepancy amount had gone up from £350 to £850. And I checked everything, and I pulled out every bag of money. I took it all apart, I recounted everything, reweighed everything, and I did this loads of times in the afternoon. I was sat in tears. We'd arranged to go out that night. I'd already spoken to my ex-boss and told him what was going on. And he'd actually been talking to the union man, who told him, I think you need to get her to get in touch with me. But at that time, when I very first started, Alistair had said to me, look, I wouldn't recommend you going to the National Federation of Sub-Postmasters because they're absolutely useless. They no longer represent the interests of the postmaster, but the CW are very good. And he'd left me the forms to join, but because of all the issues I'd been having, I just hadn't had time to fill in these forms because I'd spent all day on the phone, either to the helpline or to customers with issues. I just didn't have time for anything else. Plus, I was getting to grips with having a new business. I had to learn how to do, the tax and the wages and everything else. And we were due to go out, and I was just sat in tears. I was sat in streams of tears, and I checked the money so many times, and it wasn't there. And I'd got really annoyed with me other half, who he always used to come in on a Saturday afternoon and help me do the cleaning, ready so it was clean for Monday. And I said, just go home. I don't want you here. I just need to be able to check everything. I need to be able to concentrate. So he'd gone home, taken my daughter home and the dog. And no matter what I did, I couldn't find this money all day. Just before I finished, I checked for the final time, and the full £850 had come back from nowhere. And I just didn't know what was going on. And I was sat in tears at this night out that we were having. It was a bit of a closure celebration. It was meeting up with Alistair, with Janice, who was our person we worked with. And I was just sat in tears. And he said, look, I've spoken to Mark. He's agreed to speak to you, but you've got to put the form in to join the union. So I put the form in to join the union, but the paperwork had actually not come through. And when I spoke to Mark and told him what was going on, he said all he wanted me to do was he wanted me to go in the next day and look at the modem to see if the light was red or green. And that's when I started watching the modem, realising that every few seconds the light went red. Well, apparently that meant we lost connection. So it transpired that once I'd spoken to Mark, he told me what was happening was that I was losing connection. There was a problem on my line.
Sorry to interrupt. So was that the very first time that you realised what the core of the problem was that you were facing in your branch?
Yes, it was, yeah.
You mentioned the helpline, having called the helpline. Was that ever discussed with them?
Yes, I was ringing the helpline. Every time the red light came on after that, I would ring the helpline. And the helpline's response every time was, right, take out all the wiring, put it all back together, has the green light come on? And I'd say, yes, it's on now. And they'd say, well, it's fine now. And then 2 seconds later, the light would go off again, and I'd rephone the helpline and they'd tell me the same thing. And I'd say, but I've just done this. There's a problem on the line. And I kept asking them to send somebody out, and I was phoning time after time after time, every day. So much so that it transpired that they weren't even noting when I'd rung up. I was phoning that many times in the day. And if I didn't phone back the same day, if I just took it all apart and mended it, because that's all they were going to tell me to do anyway, they wouldn't send anybody out. They would say, oh, well, that was yesterday, so today it's a new day, so we assumed we've closed the case. And I was just having this all the time.
And I'm going to take you through various people that you spoke to other than the helpline, one at a time. So let's start with the Communications and Workers Union. You've mentioned that you spoke to somebody from there.
Yeah.
How did you first get in contact with them?
Well, he'd actually, he was a friend of Alistair's, so Alistair gave me his phone number. And obviously, as soon as I sort of told him what was happening about the figures and that, and they say after him asking me to watch the thing, I'd rang him to say, oh yeah, this light goes red every few seconds. And that's when he told me that meant that I was losing power on me.
And you said that he was called Mark.
Mark Baker.
Mark Baker.
Yeah.
And did he tell you who else you should speak to?
Well, we were speaking for quite a while, and he was sending emails on my behalf to people to try and get things done. So I kept thinking somebody would come, and I still kept phoning the helpline, and nobody would come. And every night when I got home, I'd phone up and speak to Mark, and I'd tell him what had been going on during the day. And this happened for several months, until the point when I said to him, I just can't work like this anymore. At this point, I was so stressed out, I wasn't sleeping. I was spending so much time on the phone arguing with either customers or well, not fully arguing, but speaking to customers who were shouting me down because the bills hadn't been paid and having to solve other people's problems when I had this problem going on, or on the phone to the helpline all the time. And then Mark every night. I closed the post office, and I rang the helpline and I told them I'm closing the office and I am not reopening until we get something done about what's going on with this line. So I told them I wanted a senior member of staff to phone me back. Nobody did. And I went to the press, our local press, and they ran a story. And they got in touch with the post office, who said they were going to be speaking to me. And they did speak to me. The senior manager rung up, Patricia Bursey, I think she was called, rung me, and she shouted at me like a bulldog. And she threatened to charge me for closing my post office, and she told me that if I didn't reopen my post office, I was against the terms of my contract, and that they would be taking the money that they'd paid for the refurbishment off me. And I told her, in your contract, it stated you were going to be giving me working equipment. You haven't given me working equipment, so your contract is not worth the paper it's written on. And I won't be reopening until this is rectified. I said, by this time, Mark had advised me that start making a diary of when you lose connection or when you have a discrepancy, because you'll probably find that all these things connect together. And I told her I'd been making this diary, and I had it in my diary that on the days that I was having all these issues where I was losing connection were the same days that I was having all these major discrepancies. Now, sometimes the discrepancies would come back, like I say, but not every discrepancy was coming back. And we went from an office that ran fairly well to where I was just putting money in every week to balance. And
in terms of those that you spoke to, did you speak to somebody called Kevin Gilliland?
I did, yeah. So Mark had advised me that Kevin Gilliland was probably going to be my best person to speak to. So I'd emailed Kevin Gilliland and said by this time I'd been closed over a week and Patricia Bursey had still done nothing. And I told her that I was going to be speaking to this Kevin Gilliland. And she tried to stop me and told me they were working on it and they were getting people sorted. And he said, I'll get it sorted. And he sent emails on my behalf. And when I wasn't hearing anything, I thought, well, if I'm emailing him and he's emailing somebody else, why I should be emailing them who's he's emailing? So that's what I did. And I emailed and I was like, is there any updates? And that's when they sent me all the internal documents about who was chasing who. And what you'd find is when you were kids and you used to do something wrong and you had sisters and your dad would say, which one of you was it? And you'd all point at each other. Well, basically, the internal emails, I've passed it to somebody, but they're not here at the moment. So they've passed it to somebody else who's passed it to somebody else. And all that was happening is they were just passing it along to somebody else, telling everybody, oh, keep me updated on what's going on, but nobody actually doing anything. At this time, I was still short. I couldn't pay my business loan because I wasn't earning anything, because that's the point. If we were open, we were earning. And I still had to pay my business loans and my rent.
And was one of the people that he pointed you in the direction of Angela van der Bogert?
Yeah, so he said that he would be getting this Angela von Bogert to look at my case.
And who was she?
She's a post office director, and she actually came out to see me. So she came out to see me. At this time, they'd convinced me to reopen. I'd demanded that I had an audit for reopening, and when the auditor had come out to do this reopening, we checked the money, which I'd left correct, and we checked the cash, and the figure was one thing. And we checked the cash, and we looked again at the figure, and the figure had altered only by £5, but it had altered in front of it. But because we hadn't printed the original figure against the next figure, he said, oh, well, maybe just re-thinking. Then he tried to tell me, oh, well, it's just a delay in the system, so it doesn't matter. Things are getting there. It may be slow, it may not be right, but they are getting there. So, but I was like, if the auditors walk in and I'm £20,000 short, I can't say, well, can you hang about for a few minutes? Because most of it might come back. They're going to shut me down there and then, and they're going to be taking me to court, you know.
After people from the post office came to your branch, did things improve?
No, they didn't. They kept telling me they were. I was emailing them. And what happened was, at this point, I was still going home with a lot of discrepancies. But 9 times out of 10, by the time I came in the morning, it'd be sorted and it'd all be square. But what had happened was I'd had a customer in who'd been told he'd sent a MoneyGram, and he said, they've sent this MoneyGram back and they've told me I can't send it. So they've given me a code for me to reclaim this money. So what happened was I'd done this MoneyGram and we'd lost connection, like we did. So I tried to redo it. But when I tried to redo it, it told me I couldn't redo it and that the code had already been used. So I phoned up MoneyGram and they said, well, you've just done this transaction. And I said, I didn't. So I did a transaction log. There was no sign of this transaction ever happening on my system. There was nothing on my paperwork to say it had happened, but it had happened for several £100s. So I phoned Angela von Bogert, and she said, I'll deal with it, and what we'll have to do is we'll send you a transaction correction so then you can pay your customers. The customer wasn't very happy. He'd had to go away with his transaction had been used, and he was going away with no money until I rang him to say that he could come and get his cash back. And they sent the transaction correction, and I'd written a letter to the post office saying that is 100% proof that this is happening to me. It's an acknowledgement that I've done a transaction that is nowhere on my accounts. It's nowhere. It's not to be seen anywhere. It's as if it's not happened. I didn't get any receipts. I didn't get anything off the system. It just threw me off like it used to. So it's 100% proof, and I am not putting any more money into this system because it's proving there's a problem. And why should I pay when there's problems? I kept saying to them, I'm not paying for the post office's issues. I'm sick of putting money into the system because it's faulty. I'm telling everybody, I mean, at this point, I wasn't sleeping more than an hour or 2 hours a night. I was like a walking zombie. By the time this had all been going on, I was open for just under 2 years, and I'd probably slept 5 hours a week, if that, for those 5 years. I was getting so many kidney infections constantly that the doctor would actually leave me prescriptions in reception without me ever going in because I didn't have time to get to the doctors. My staff were so stressed out. One of them, she left, Janice left because she couldn't deal with it anymore. We were all just falling apart.
You've given quite a few examples of discrepancies and shortfalls, and you've set out more in your witness statement as well. Could you estimate in broad terms how much you think you had to pay the post office as a result?
Well, I would say roughly about £8,000 because what was happening is, in the end, Alistair said, look, what I'll do is I'll work 1 day a month so you can have a day a month off. But actually, every time he worked, there was an issue and he'd have to ring me anyway because obviously it wasn't just happening just when I was there, it was happening to everybody who worked there. It was, so he rang me to say the first day that I was £4,000 short, and he couldn't find it, and he'd been through everything and he could find nothing on his paperwork. And the next day he rang me to say that he was £2,000 over and he couldn't find it. But he said, but this time, because the last one had turned out he'd not looked at, or he thought he hadn't taken in any transfers. But he had taken in the transfers, but it wasn't on the system when he'd done it. But by the time he'd finished doing it and re-looked, the transfer was in the system. This time he said, I know I did that at 8 o'clock this morning. He was doing his cash last thing at night, and the transaction had only just gone into his system, so it'd been delayed in the ethos for all those hours. And he wrote an email, which I again forwarded to the post office, to say that in all the years that he'd worked on the system, he'd never seen it behaving like it was working, it's behaving when I was there,
We've heard about, in some cases, shortfalls increasing when sub-postmasters have tried to rectify them. Is that something that ever happened to you?
Yeah, it was. I once put a cheque in for a discrepancy. When I went to go run my cheques out, I was showing more of a cheque. So I tried to rem it out and it doubled. And I tried again to rem it out and it doubled again, and I kept having to reverse it. So it never did get rectified. I don't know what happened to that.
Can you explain for people who might not be familiar with the term what you mean by remming it out?
Well, basically, at the end of each working day, any cheques or anything had to be sent to the post office through the internal post. So what you had to do was you had to tell the system, I'm going to be sending this through the system. And that's what we call a rem. So you would tell the system, I'm sending a cheque for, I think the cheque was £750. I'm sending this £750 cheque to the thing, and it would take it off your system.
I'd like to move on to the audit and the investigation that followed. You had an early something called account of cash. Is that right?
Yeah, it was just a young lass who come in. It was just my 6-month check that she wanted to just check the cash and stock. It was just one girl. She just came in, checked everything very quickly, said, to the best of her knowledge, we were about £10 adrift. Just went off.
But that wasn't a formal audit.
No, it wasn't a formal audit. No, the only formal audit I actually had was the one I requested, and the one at the end.
And you say you requested it. Was that after you had closed the post office?
After I closed it, and I told them I wasn't reopening until I had an audit. I tried to fight for them because they kept telling me if I didn't reopen my post office, that how could they check what was going on with my line? Because they couldn't test it. But even if they stood there next to me and I opened it and I had a major discrepancy, they wouldn't write it off. I'd still have to pay it, even if they watched me do everything. I tried to fight to make them do it, but at the end of the day, I was getting very concerned that I couldn't pay my business loans. I was relatively new at that point, and I was getting very scared that what am I going to do? I mean, like I say, I just wasn't sleeping.
When they carried out that audit, did they identify any problems?
I say just this bouncing £5. At the very end, the last audit, there was no issues. I think they did find something. I just paid it in cash. I think it was a stamp that was missing on the final audit.
Did the time come when you closed your post office?
It did. I closed just before Christmas, and I told them if they didn't come and sort it out, I wasn't reopening after Christmas. The doctor had rang to say that my liver was showing signs of shutting down, that my blood tests hadn't been very good, because at that time I really felt like I was dropping dead. My blood pressure had increased to a point where it was dangerous. They were still trying different medications, trying to get my blood pressure to a more acceptable level. But it got much worse after I closed.
And you said December, so that's December 2016, is it?
2017 it was.
Did you take advice, I think, from the Communications and Workers Union?
I did, yeah. Well, I was taking advice all along from Mark. But in the end, I just couldn't do it anymore. I'd gone to a shade of grey that a human shouldn't be. I really felt like I was going to drop dead. My parents were begging me, please close, because look at the state of you, look what's going on. My sister said to me, Wendy, you're going to go bankrupt anyway, because if you stay open, I mean, I was so worried about figures that when I was sending money back, because I was a high volume office, I sent a lot of money back every fortnight to the post office. And when I was bagging money up to send back to the post office, I would be videoing my figures before I start. I would video myself bagging the money up, and then I would video the figure after to make sure the two things agreed, because had that money gone missing in the ethos, there was £26,000 in each of those bags. And I had several of those bags to do each week,
So you were videoing yourself to keep evidence of...
Keep evidence of this money going into the bags, that the money had gone into the system, that I'd told them that the money was going back.
And why did you feel it was necessary to do that?
Because my discrepancies were getting so wild. My worst discrepancy in any one day was over £30,000. It was just so worrying, because I was always liable for it.
I'm going to move on to your involvement in the group litigation, the Bates and others case. How did you find out about that?
Well, to be honest, I'd actually joined it while I was still open because Mark felt like the evidence that I had was very strong. So he really wanted me to get involved. So I was still open at the point when I joined the case. But obviously when I closed, I had to do a second part to my story because I'd sent them the first part of what was going on and how I'd written this and they'd written that. But a lot of the stuff, when things went wrong, the post office wouldn't write me anything in writing. They would phone me up and speak to me verbally because they didn't want the paperwork, they didn't want the paper trail of accepting that there'd been issues in my office. But regardless of the issues in my office, all they ever did was send Royal Mail to send BT to test the line. And I kept telling them, you're sending the wrong person. The problem isn't the line. You've sent BT 3 times. Stop sending BT. Send the people who've done the wiring. And like I say, when some of it did come, nothing had been wired incorrectly. So the alarm system wasn't wired correctly. They hadn't fitted the device that they're supposed to use so that the alarm doesn't use your phone line. Obviously, there was also the gas and electric machine was on that same line. And so all these things would fight for this connection. I was getting phoned out in the middle of the night saying the alarm was going off and that would be the figures going through the system. But I'd still had to physically go to the post office just in case I was being broken into.
So you provided all of that information as part of the litigation. Did you receive damages in the court case?
I did. I received about 24,000.
And do you feel that fully compensates you for what you experienced?
No, I've lost my business, and that business was my retirement. I don't have a retirement. I've worked for the post office for 16 years and walked away with nothing. I'm in debt now until I'm in my mid-70s, and I'm not looking to get out of that debt. The bank still has a right to come after my home because I still owe them this money. We can't pay off the debt. I mean, all that money really did was do things like the boiler had been broken because of the problems in the system. Because what I should say is, of the time that I was open, of those 20 odd months I was open, there was never a week I wasn't closed because of the problems with the system, because I couldn't work on the system because it would lose connection all the time. So I couldn't serve customers. So what was happening was the customers were getting so frustrated because every time they came, the post office was shut.
So you lost money during the course that the post office was open because you couldn't open.
Yeah.
And presumably you've lost the money that you invested in the post office.
I've lost the money I invested. I've also I've lost my retirement. I've lost my income. You know, what was supposed to be this nice standard of living, it never transpired. All that happens is it made me very ill. I'm still not well. My organs still don't work efficiently.
It's right to say you weren't suspended or terminated by the post office.
So, I mean, I am one of the ones that officially I'm not going to be paid out.
You've mentioned quite a few effects on you personally in terms of lost sleep. Psychologically, how would you describe the impact on you?
I had a complete breakdown after. I just shut down as a person. Myself and my partner grew a bit distant. We moved into separate rooms, which we still sleep in separate rooms. And although that partnership is coming back together a bit more now, we've lost that intimacy that we used to have. Obviously, there was a massive impact on my daughter. I mean, when she was little, we used to live in this lovely, pristine house. I didn't have energy to get in the bath, never mind clean the house or anything. So my partner was going to work, trying to come home, do what he could, but the house was dirty, you know, and he got very, very depressed as well.
Did it impact on your reputation at all?
It did. The rumours went round that she stole from the post office. That's why it closed, especially because I closed so quick. Now, what I did at the end, the last few days, was I took the makeup off so people could see how ill I looked. And obviously there was a lot of concern from people when they came in and saw how ill I was looking. And bloody hell, what's going on? What's wrong with you? You know. But I heard the rumours that I'd stolen from the post office. Everywhere I went, I was post office. Oh, it's post office lady, it's post office lady. I'm no longer post office lady. All I hear anybody wants to talk about now is the post office. And I really don't want to talk about the post office.
What would you like from the post office?
Well, firstly, we need compensating in full for what we've actually lost. I don't just want the post office to take responsibility for what they've done to us. The government claim that they weren't party to anything. Now, the post office and the government have an agreement that if the post office have to spend anything by 50 million, that the government need to be involved in that. Now, our settlement for all of us was 57 million. So the government can't say we weren't party to that, because their own situation says we were party to that, because the post office has to go to the government if it's over 50 million. So the government giving it all, oh, it's not our responsibility, it's a post office thing. It's not just the post office, it's the post office and the government. So the government should be looking at repaying us what we've lost as well.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add at all?
Yeah, what I would like to say is on the state of the compensation, of the 555, a vast majority were like me, who weren't prosecuted, but we still had the same outcome. We still lost everything. You know, just because I haven't physically lost my home yet doesn't mean it's safe. I lost my business, I lost my income, I lost myself, I lost my relationship, I lost so much of me that I need to have some happiness back, and the only way we can do that now, unfortunately, is by getting compensated in full for what we've lost, and also what we've been through. You know, my health is still not good. What I should say is, I mean, I had a suspected stroke after I closed as well, just down to the thing. At that point, my blood pressure was 295 over 195, which is classed as critical. And it was pretty much stable at that. It nearly killed me, you know. And for people to say, oh, it's all right, it doesn't matter. It does matter. It devastated our lives. And we need repaying, and we need compensating, and we need everything to be put back the way it should have been.
Thank you very much. Chair, do you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions of you, Miss Martin, but I would like to thank you so much for giving us a comprehensive account of the way in which all this has impacted upon you. So thanks very much for taking the time and trouble to give evidence to us.
Thank you.
Sir, Mohammed Amir is ready to give evidence before lunch if you would like to hear from him before lunch.
Well, I'll be guided either by you, Mr. Blake, or by Miss Hodge, who may be taking that evidence. If you think that we can conveniently fit him in within, say, about a half an hour, because some people obviously take longer than others, so that he completes his evidence by, say, about 1:15, then I think probably we would prefer to do that. But let's have a 5-minute break and you decide which is preferable, all right?
Thank you very much.
Right, thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair. Our next witness is Mr. Mohammed Amir. Mr. Amir, can you see and hear us?
Could we? Oh,
Yes.
sorry, yes, yeah, fine.
Yes, I can.
Jane, our usher, will take you through your affirmation.
Good afternoon, Mr. Amir. If you'd like to repeat after me, I do solemnly, sincerely and truly.
I do sincerely and can you
Solemnly,
solemnly,
sincerely and truly.
cheerily,
Sincerely and truly.
sincerely and cheerily
Declare and affirm
declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Amir, as you know, my name is Catriona Hodge, and I ask questions on behalf of the inquiry. Please, can you state your full name?
It's Mohammed Zubair Amir.
You made a witness statement on the 11th of January of this year, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Do you have a copy of that statement before you?
I do, yes.
Please, could you turn to the final page of your statement at page 10?
Yeah,
Do you see your signature there?
I do, yeah.
When you made that statement on the 11th of January, was the content true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
It is, yeah.
I'd like to begin by asking some questions about you, Mr. Amir. How old are you?
I'm 47 years old.
Where do you currently live?
I live in Bolton.
Are you married?
I am, yeah.
For how long have you been married?
27 years.
Do you have children?
I have 5 children, yes.
Before you applied to be a sub-postmaster, you ran a newsagent for approximately 4 years, is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
And after selling that business, you set up 2 independent shops selling takeaway food, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
For how long did you run those 2 businesses?
It was approximately 3 to 4 years.
What sort of hours did you work?
It was night shift, so it started around 5 p.m. till the early hours.
Would you describe yourself as a hard-working man?
Yes, I do. I have been, since I left school, I went to college briefly. I was the eldest, and I started a business when I was 17 years old, and I worked 12 to 14 hours a day for them at the retail shop at the beginning, and then in the takeaway again I worked 10 to 12 hours a day.
When you sold your takeaway business, you decided to become a sub-postmaster, is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
What attracted you to the role?
What attracted me was it was a good job I seen with the post office, reputable, and it was partly retail as well, because there was a retail side to it as well, because I'd already done that, and it was a reputable company, the post office, and that was the reason.
Were you attracted to working within your community?
I was, yes. I wanted to, stay in my local community, and that was one of the attractions, yes.
How did you first become involved with the post office?
My brother initially took on the post office, and then I joined him in 2001 or 2 it was. Then we got another post office. He started another business, so I took over as sub-postmaster at both the offices, and I started off from there.
At which branch was
Westwood Park, it was in Winton Eccles, and Little Lever Post Office in Bolton.
You said that your brother took it on. Was that in the role of sub-postmaster?
Yeah, he was a sub-postmaster for a few years, and then I took over his role.
You say you took over. Was that in about 2004?
I officially took over, but I was working in the post office since 2001.
But you became the sub-postmaster of the office in 2004, is that correct?
Oh, yeah.
For how long did you run the branch at Westwood Park?
I ran it from, I was initially there from 2001, then we bought Little Lever Post Office in 2002. I went there and I ran both of them. Westwood Park I ran until I sold it in January 2009.
You've mentioned a second branch which you purchased, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Which branch was that?
That was the Little Lever Post Office.
And do you recall when you purchased that branch?
Yeah, my brother purchased it in 2002, and like I say, I took over the role of sub-postmaster in 2004 of Westwood Park and Little Lever Post Office.
Do you remain the sub-postmaster of that branch today?
I do, yes. Little Lever.
You purchased a third branch, I believe, in 2007, is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Which branch was that?
That was Farnworth Post Office.
And were you the sub-postmaster of that branch?
Yes.
For how long did you run that branch?
I ran that, bought it in July 2007 and sold it in July 2015.
Did you employ any staff to assist you in running the three branches?
Yes, I had numerous staff from at all three branches.
Can you
at each office as well.
can you recall roughly how many?
At Westwood Park, there was, including the retail side, there was about 4 staff there. At Farnworth Post Office, there was approximately 8 to 9 staff, and at Little Lever Post Office, there was about 4 staff as well.
What was your relationship like with your staff?
At the beginning, it was brilliant. It was a mixture of staff that I took on at the offices, and I employed some of my friends, and also some family friends as well. So it was a good, at the beginning it was quite good, yes.
What role did your businesses play within your local community?
In the local community, I've done quite a lot in the local community. I done a lot of charity work. We sponsored the school football teams, and we had a good role in the community, yes. One of my office, Westwood Park, was in Manchester. The other 2 were in my local vicinity in Bolton. So I was quite active, especially in them.
What were your hopes and expectations in terms of running these businesses?
I wanted to, at that time, in 2006-07, when I bought the third one, my plan was to expand, get a few more post offices, and just stay with the post office for the remainder of my career.
I'd like to ask you now a little about the training and support you received when you started running your post office branches. Was the Horizon system installed in the Westwood Park post office when you started working there?
Yeah, it was already in there when we took over.
Did you receive any training on Horizon?
Yes, we had a trainer. My brother was the sub postmaster, so he took the training at, I think it was Stockport Post Office for a day or two. And then we had a trainer come in for about a week or two to help us out. But then when I took over the post office as a sub postmaster, I was sent to Stockport again, which was useless, to be honest with you. It wasn't even practical. But I did have a trainer as well, which, to be honest with you, I probably, because I was already working there, I probably knew more than them.
Did the training you received cover balancing the branch accounts?
Yes, it did do.
Did it do so in any detail?
No, I wouldn't say it was. It was more of like self-training, to be honest with you, whilst hands-on at the offices. So learnt mostly everything ourselves, and plus because I had experienced staff from who were already there from the previous sub postmaster, which I took on. We got a lot of help from them, so we learnt everything ourselves mostly.
Did you receive training from the post office in branch?
We had a trainer, but like I say, it wasn't much of a help, to be honest with you.
What other support was available to you when dealing with the Horizon system?
We had an area manager who we could call, and the helpline. That was the biggest help. We thought we had the helpline.
Why would you contact the helpline for support?
If we had any issues with the Horizon or any problem regarding customers or anything, we'd have to get in contact with them to get help.
How often did you contact the helpline?
On a regular basis, we'd get in contact with them over small things, and then especially when on balancing, when we were quite short on the money, we'd get in contact with them on a regular basis, but it wasn't much of a help.
By regular, can you give an indication roughly how many times a week you might have contacted the helpline?
Easily 2-3 times a week.
Did they assist you in resolving the issues you encountered?
Some they did do, but when it come to discrepancies, it was of no help at all.
I'd like to ask you about one particular discrepancy you experienced of £2,200. Did you contact the helpline to seek help in relation to that discrepancy?
I did do. I'd come over at one of the branches, Little Lever it was, and we couldn't find this money. It had been there for a couple of weeks, so I went over time and time over again, but had a manager there who was very experienced. We both went through everything, all the paperwork. We couldn't get to why we were this money short, so I rang the helpline and explained everything to them. They assisted me, but when we, according to them, I followed their steps, exactly what they told me what to do. When we rolled it over, the amount had doubled.
And how did you resolve that discrepancy?
Well, I told my manager. I asked them as well. Why is it doubled? I've call you for help to resolve this, and it's doubled, but it was, you know, there's no help at all from anyone.
Did you repay the sum that
Yes, I had to pay that back.
was having doubled? That was now £4,400. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
You've explained that you experienced discrepancies. In which of your branches did these arise?
All of the branches I had issues with, but one of the branches mainly at Little Lever, but all three of the branches really.
Can you give an idea of how frequently these discrepancies were arising in your branches?
Well, at the beginning it was started off as small amounts, and then it started getting frequent and more, you know, at every branch. I tried everything, to be honest with you. And, you know, I tried taking different steps. We had shared stock units. I changed that. We got separate stock units because I thought it could be staff, you know, doing these discrepancies or taking money out. But it just never stopped, to be honest with you, carried on.
How did it make you feel to be experiencing these frequent discrepancies in your branches?
At the time, to be honest with you, we were at the post office. Everything come to a head when I bought my third post office, Farnworth, in 2007. It was a big office and had quite a lot of staff there. And I was putting my head down, trying to, you know, make changes and make it, you know, profitable. Put a retail side to it and everything. And then having a problem with one of my offices at Little Lever, so I ended up going there, and that's when it all really started off for me, to be honest with you. You know, that's when I had my heart attack as well. I didn't know at the time. I went to the office. My friend was working there, a close friend by this time, of which I got to know through the post office. He'd worked at another Westwood Park office for us, and I put him there in charge at Little Lever. We went through everything. We couldn't find, I think there was about £3,000 shortage there. We couldn't find it, and I think he got a bit frustrated, and he probably thought, you know, I was accusing him, my friend, and he'd left. I was there for a few days. We went over it and over it, all the paperwork with another member of staff. Couldn't find where the discrepancy was, and on that. On the second day, it was in the evening, I suffered a heart attack at the age of 33, and I think at that time I didn't realise, to be honest, because I was young. I just even after my heart attack, I tried to carry on. My family did ask me to take a step back and you know, get rid of one of the offices. I had two in Bolton, I had one in Manchester, so to get rid of the one in Manchester, so I didn't have to travel much, and the other two were in my local area, so I got rid of that, and I tried to carry on, but, you know, everything, I think, catches up with you sooner rather than later, and I just carried on experiencing problems and with the system and with, you know, and it affected my health quite bad. I think I did have, looking back at everything, going through everything again, and looking back at it, it's been 14 years since I had that episode of the heart attack and everything. At that time, I didn't know what it was. why it was caused, because I was fit and healthy at that time. I was a regular gym goer. I was a smoker, which I'd given up about, I think it was 9-10 months. I'd given up smoking. I was looking after myself, eating healthy, and I ended up with a heart attack. I was the youngest person in my surgery to have it. I didn't know at that time, to be honest with you. Like I said, because I was young and I didn't realise that, you know, it could be because of this. I thought it could be because I'm running 3 offices, I'm running around, but I took a step back, and looking back at everything now, it's opened all wounds up, to be honest with you, and, you know, I do blame post office for even causing that, to be honest with you. Even after that, I suffered, I'm still suffering from severe depression, and it just changed my life, and it's never been the same after that.
Mr. Amir, you've explained there were frequent discrepancies. Did you ever raise any concerns about the number and size of the shortfalls you were experiencing in your branches?
Numerous times, but like I say, all we were told was, I was told is, you know, it was just my offices, and that's the impression I got off them as well, and even having to chat with the area managers, fair to them, you know, they were focused on sales and etc., you know, getting our branches to do more sales, and they weren't really particularly interested in, you know, what our financial status was or anything. But I did mention to all the area managers numerous times and the helpline, but all that we were getting told was it was just our branch, and hearing everyone's statements now, it seems like it wasn't just me and my offices.
What was the approximate value of the shortfalls that you were experiencing on a regular basis?
On a regular basis, it was in hundreds, then it went into thousands quite a number of times. You know, I think the biggest one is that probably £4,400, but you know, they were on a regular basis, to be honest with you. You know, at least every couple of months there was a few £1,000s.
And what did you do when you experienced these shortfalls?
At the beginning, it was okay because I was just paying that out of my own pocket, and then it started getting. You got to a point where, to be honest with you, there wasn't much left from the salaries, and started borrowing off. Thankfully, I had a good sportive family. They helped me out, and friends, and then, you know, eventually that stopped. I started using the credit cards and etc., and just carried on accruing debt.
At the time these shortfalls occurred, what did you believe was causing them?
At the beginning, I suspected my staff, sometimes, you know, myself, you know, maybe not doing something right. But like I've stated before, I had experienced staff with me who had been in the post office for a very long time, and with the help of them as well, I knew it wasn't me, and because it couldn't have been, you know, all of us.
You said you initially suspected you might be at fault, or your staff, but you came to reject that as the explanation.
That's right, yeah, because I took numerous steps in, like I say, we had one stock unit for everyone. Then when I got the third office, there was separate stock units, so I decided to go with that concept and change it at all the offices, but still it carried on.
What did you ultimately conclude then was the cause of these shortfalls?
Must be the horizon system, because there was numerous times where we'd get a balance report, which is, you know, of all our stock unit, what we had in the office, cash, stamps, all, and I take it out after, like, you know, 10, 20 minutes later on next morning, and the figures would be different. So I couldn't understand why we left the office in the evening, and the next morning, why would they be different? And numerous times that happened, even like half an hour later when you were checking the stock, and sometimes when we couldn't find the money, we were there late in the evening, 8, 9 o'clock, after we'd closed the office at 5:30. We were there till late in the evening trying to find out, and we'd do these reports, and they'd show different figures. So I was convinced it was the system, but couldn't prove anything. Or who could we? The only help we had was from the helpline, and they were of no help.
What effect did the shortfalls have upon your relationships with your colleagues?
A lot of my friends, I had 2, 3 friends in the offices, a couple who were family friends because it was in our local area, we knew them. They'd left because of these discrepancies, and, you know, that relationship wasn't there at the end of it. To be honest with you, I still see some of them now, and, you know, not even, I don't think they're comfortable, and neither am I meeting them and, you know, speaking about our experiences, what happened and why they left. So not a very good experience, no.
Can you estimate how much you paid out to the post office to make good the shortfalls that you experienced in your branches?
In the 20 years I've been running these offices, altogether I've estimated at about 130,000.
Were your branches ever audited?
Yeah, numerous times.
Were shortfalls found during the audits of your branches?
To be honest with you, it was very scary, and we had that over our heads all the time about the auditors coming. So I was very careful in trying to make sure that if there was a shortfall, I'd make sure that, you know, wherever I got the money from, by hook or crook, I'd make sure that the money was there. So, because it was, whenever they'd come, it's like worse than the police raiding you, and it was like, it was very scary at the time, because they'd come in 3 of the branches, and I'd have to go to all 3 branches and eventually and go through the audits. And so I'd make sure that we were down maybe a couple of £100 here and there, which we'd make good straight away whilst the auditors were there. But I'd made sure that we weren't down with the money or anything.
How were these audits conducted?
There'd be 4 or 5 people come to your branch about an hour before you opened. They'd be there waiting for you. If I had a retail shop that was already open, they'd inform them, they'd ring me up. I'd come to one of the branches and open up. They wouldn't maybe if, you know, if I was there, then I'd have to go in and accompany him and go through all the stock, the cash, the stamps and everything. And if I wasn't there, one of my staff members would go through with them with the audit and go through all the stock.
What was your impression of the thoroughness of their investigations?
it was like, I felt like, they found something, they'd already know something which I didn't know, and every time it was very scary because you didn't know what the outcome would be. So it was a bit scary when they come, to be honest with you, every time.
Did you ever challenge any of the auditor's findings?
I did do once. They said there was £1,000 down at one of my office, and so I challenged it, and I went through everything with them, and there was a bundle of £1,000 missing, which they didn't see, which I told them that you've not added this in, which they said, they stated that I was lying, and I'd put it there myself. I said, you'd accompanied me inside the office. How could I, in front of you, put it there? So it was things like that. This was at the beginning of my role as sub postmaster, probably in around 2004, 2005. So I think that caused, a thing in your head, and I was, always wary of them every time they come, to be honest with you, and I'd make sure I'd go through with them, and they did make mistakes, and like I said, they were human at the end of the day as well, and would help them go through the stuff. They probably didn't see certain things, and yeah.
Were you allowed to continue trading when shortfalls were discovered during audits?
I had to make it good more or less straight away, or they'd put it into the suspense account and give me time to make it good as soon as, which most likely, like it was probably a few £100. I'd have the retail side next door. I'd just get the money from there, and I'd just make it good straight away in front of them.
Did the post office ever take any action against you in relation to the shortfalls?
No.
You've explained that you've sold 2 of your branches that you had. What led you to sell those branches?
After I had my heart attack, my family stated that I'd take a step back and get rid of one of the offices and take it a bit easy, because they were a bit concerned about my health. So that was the reason I sold one of my branches. And because I was under quite a lot of stress at the time, because of these shortfalls and running a lot of staff, etc. So I sold that office, and then after I sold that office, these problems carried on, and it was getting bigger and bigger, and my debt kept on going up, and so I decided to sell all my offices, because by this time in 2010, 11, I started suffering from depression, and I think that's when everything caught up to me, and I decided to sell all my offices because I wasn't making anything out of them, because whatever I was earning, it was going back into the office, and it was pointless, and I was going through a lot of hardship, so I thought, what's the point? So I decided to sell all of them, and eventually I sold another one in 2015. I've been trying to sell this third one for the past maybe 10 years or so, but I suppose no one really wants to get into the post office now.
What has been the financial cost to you of giving up the 2 businesses that you've sold?
Well, I've lost an income which I really didn't have, but at least I'm not accruing more debt. But I'm just, it seems like 20 years of hard work. Last 4 or 5 years I've not really been working at the post offices, but all my time I've spent in the post office, my office, one of them was awarded numerous awards for best sales in the whole region, etc. I've done a lot of, work in the community. I think it's, gone all to waste, to be honest with you, and I've ended up worse off than probably I was 20 years ago when I started.
You've explained that your sister is now running the Little Lever branch on your behalf. Do you know if that branch is continuing to experience discrepancies and shortfalls?
They tend not to talk to me much about all these problems, but I do know that still are experiencing, yes.
Do you have an idea as to what the amount of these shortfalls are?
I'm not too sure exactly what they are, but I know they, in hundreds of pounds, yes.
And do you know how they are being resolved?
Yes, obviously we get a salary, so it's all going through there.
Are they being, is your sister making good the shortfalls in the branch?
Yes.
Have you been able to find work since you stopped running your Little Lever branch?
No, I haven't. To be honest with you, last probably 5-6 years have been very difficult for me. I've had a lot of issues with my heart and with depression. I hardly get out of my house, to be honest with you. I'm mostly inside at home. I have tried doing a couple of things, but I find it difficult to, go out and even meet people, to be honest with you. I don't have no social life or anything. And it's just a bit difficult to go through day-to-day life.
How has your reputation in your local community been affected?
Because my offices were in my community and I was employing some of my friends, some of my family friends, reputation isn't very good. I think people think ill of me, of what I've probably put them through as well. And yeah, it's just hard, to be honest with you.
Has there been an impact upon your relationship with your family?
Yes, it has, with all my family in different ways. My family, parents and my brothers, it's affected in a different way. My own partner and my children is affected in a different way. Last 10 years, especially last 5-6 years, I'm in my bedroom most of the time, all day, and I don't really have that relationship with even my children, to be honest with you. And I think I've missed out on a lot.
You've mentioned that you borrowed money from family members. Have you been able to repay them?
I've paid more or less. No, I've probably not paid everything back to them, but they've probably written it off as well. My family have, but the money that I've borrowed off my friends, etc., I've paid back. But I've still, to this day, I've got huge debts on my credit cards, and I've had to remortgage one of my houses a few years ago as well. So
You mentioned that your wife has been affected. Can you describe how it has affected her?
Well, first thing is through the hardship, obviously money worries all the time. And then again, we sleep in different rooms. It's affected us. We don't have that kind of relationship as it used to be, and I just find it hard, to be honest with you myself, interacting with a lot of people.
And your children?
My children, obviously, when I went into the post office, that was when I bought my third office. That was my plan, to get my children into the office, expand, and they can join me as well. But obviously, that never happened, and I feel like I've let them down. I've not been able to do what I should have as a parent, and it's just been very difficult.
Have you received any compensation for the losses that you suffered?
I was part of the 555 litigation back in 2017, which received £20,000 a couple of years ago, but nothing after that.
Does that amount that you received reflect the losses which you believe you've suffered?
Nowhere near.
How do you feel about the Post Office's response to what's happened to you and other sub-postmasters?
Well, I can surely say that they've ruined our lives, a lot of people's lives, and that's the bottom line, to be honest with you.
What do you feel the Post Office needs to do now to put things right?
Well, they need to, I feel, compensate us, firstly, and second thing is I'd like to know the whole truth. When did the Post Office know about these issues, and why did they not admit to it earlier, and why did they put us through all this trauma in the park for the past 20 odd years?
I've no further questions for you, Mr. Amir. Is there anything you wish to say to the Chair?
Yes, I have written something down. I'd like to ask the Chair on my behalf and on behalf of myself and the 555 group litigation participants. Ordinary people like me have had to pay what the police and the Crown prosecution should have done in bringing the Post Office to the courts. Why have we still not received the costs back of £46 million, whilst the people that have had, we were the initial participants who took the Post Office to court. Yet last year, when we're very lucky, I'm very lucky anyway, I never got prosecuted, but that was because I had family and friends, and I took hardship upon myself. What about the people that of the 555s? Why are we still waiting and not received our interim compensation? To this day, we've had to pay it out of our own pockets, and I think it's very unfair that we're still waiting. And that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Amir. Chair, do you forgive?
No, I don't have any questions, but thank you very much, Mr. Amir, for taking the time and trouble to tell me all that you've spoken about this morning and into this afternoon. And you should rest assured that I will take it all on board and treat it very seriously, all right?
Thank you very much, sir.
Chair, that concludes the evidence for our morning session.
Yeah.
Shall we resume at 2:15?
That seems fine to me. So 2:15, everyone, please.